friends. I'm Dr. Abhinav Pandya, your host for today's discussion, and I welcome all of you on the behalf of Usanas Foundation for another segment of Usanas Dialogues. Today, we are here at a very critical moment. War in the Middle East, West Asia seems to be crossing all the barriers which we traditionally held in our minds. Mr. Nasrallah is dead, the chief of Hezbollah, and now the options are very open to interpretation. A lot of strategic experts are suggesting that this is going to escalate and definitely cross some of the red lines. In other quarters, there are opinions that still there are chances of peace, ceasefire, and many other options. So today we have two amazing experts to discuss various possibilities, scenarios, and let me introduce them. So we have Dr. Michael Barak. He is a senior researcher, International Institute for Counterterrorism and lecturer at Reichman University. And he's also a senior fellow at Usanas Foundation. We have Burzine Waghmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, ex-visiting India fellow, UC London, and also a fellow at Usanas Foundation. So welcome, both of you. And before we get into the question and answer session and more of a discussion mode, I would like to invite you for your opening remarks. We can go with Dr. Michael first. He comes from Israel. He's there on the ground. So it's important to know his perspective. Michael, over to you.
Okay, thanks for the invitation. And I'm glad to be here. So before I will start, before I will give my comments to the security situation in Israel, I think we should remember that the security escalation in Israel was forced in Israel since 7th of October, when Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, decided to launch a brutal attack, a massacre against civilians in the south of Israel, which included unfortunately, the international community, some parts of it don't believe it. I recommend them to watch the videos and to see that those Hamas members butchered women and raped women and also killed babies. And this is not fake news. This is not propaganda. This is something unbelievable that those Hamas members did. And because Israel was so shocked about this brutal massacre, Hezbollah, headed by Nasrallah, thought that this was a good chance to open another front against Israel in order to weaken it. Nasrallah and Yahya Sinwar, both of them are members of the evil axis of Iran, which Qasem Soleiman, the head of the IRFG, he planned to build a fire circle around Israel, to build pro-Iranian strongholds in the Middle East, like in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and from there to attack Israel. So Yahya Sinwar, as it seems, he decided to launch this initiative and attacks against Israel without consulting with Hezbollah and Iran, although they knew that about this attack, but the date they did not know. So actually Nasrallah gambled. I think he actually gambled and miscalculated the strength of Israel. I think you know that in Israel there were demonstrations about the legal reform. About a year, people got outside the streets, demonstrated that they wanted to keep and defend the spirit of the democracy of Israel. And this was a sign for the axis of evil, Hezbollah and Hamas, that the Israeli society was divided, weak, that Israel was not ready to fight and defend it on its border. And these demonstrations in Israel actually, as I see it, accelerated the decision among Hamas to start these attacks against Israel. And also Hezbollah wanted to show solidarity with Hamas and join to the battle against Israel. There are many aspects. For example, I can mention even Jordan, which many people were surprised that Jordan participated in defending the landscape from the Iranian missiles. Jordan is a part of the coalition of America, and unfortunately Iran, or let's say pro-Iranian militias in Syria, are trying also to build another stronghold in Jordan in order to challenge the security of Israel. There are several pro-Iranian militias in Syria that are involved, and also Hezbollah, by the way, involved in drug trafficking and weapon trafficking to Jordan by cooperation with the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan in order to smuggle it to the West Bank, because Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, they aspire also to open another front in the West Bank. They want that the Palestinians in the West Bank will also go will join to the fight against Israel. And Iran, which is deeply involved in that, thinks that Jordan is a very good platform in order to smuggle this weapon from Syria to Jordan and from Jordan to the West Bank, and then to accelerate the escalation against Israel. So luckily, Jordan has good security relations with Israel. Jordan is part of the American coalition. So it's also a threat, though these attempts to smuggle weapons and drugs to Jordan, it's also a threat to the national security of Jordan. So saying that, actually, let's say that it took a long time for Israel to break the power of Hamas in Gaza, the military power, because of the civilian, because Israel did not want to target and to kill civilians. You cannot keep it in 100% when it's a war, but this was one of the reasons why it was slow, the war. The second reason was the abducted Israeli civilians. So this took a long time. Why I'm saying that? Because if you look in September, everybody thought that Hezbollah was so powerful, and those nightmare scenarios that Hezbollah will launch rockets on Israel, and so there will be a loss of power, electricity in Israel, and many cities will destroy. We see that the IDF, the Israeli army, actually managed to let's say weaken the power of Hezbollah in a matter of only 2 weeks, very quickly, because the situation in Lebanon and in Gaza are different, the circumstances. So I think that one of the most painful and also cognitive impression on the minds of the Shia in Lebanon was the elimination, the targeting of Hassan Nasrallah. If you look on the name that Israel gave to the military operation in Lebanon, it's called a new order. A new order, what does it mean? First of all, it's not only a new order for Israel but to Lebanon. It's a new order to Lebanon. I will explain in a moment. And it's also a new order for the region, because first of all, Israel, its main interest is to return the citizens of Israel to the north of Israel. Many of them have become refugees inside our homeland in Israel. Many Israelis moving from house to house inside Israel because they had to evacuate their homeland, their homes in the north, because there was a fear, and still there is a fear in some way, that Radwan force, one of the elite powers of Hezbollah, planned to invade to Israel and to capture homes of the citizens, and to do like what Hamas did in 7th of October. So luckily now Israel managed to foil this scheme of Hezbollah. Most of Radwan force, Hezbollah, I think 3,000 people of them escaped to the north of Lebanon, and only 800 people of Radwan force remained in the south of Lebanon, because IDF is very successful. After collecting for many years intelligence information, the IDF managed to target and to destroy many infrastructures of Hezbollah in south of Lebanon. So the first goal with this operation against Hezbollah, which Israel began in more in high intense in September, is to return the citizens of Israel that lived in the north, to make them convince them that it's safe to live in the north, and to bring them back to the north. Now, a second thing that this operation can achieve, I think this is an opportunity. Like if now IDF continue to destroy Hezbollah infrastructures and the military power, I think this is a promise for a new era. I'm not exaggerating, but this can be a promise for a new future, a peaceful one. When you weaken the evil of Axis, then you want to cultivate the peace and you want to cultivate the prosperity in the region. What I'm trying to say is that now by weaken Hezbollah, the most powerful actor in the axis of resistance, there is more a chance that Lebanon also, if I'm speaking about Lebanon can change its fate. Because if you look in the social discourse and also in the social media, Lebanon, the common people in Lebanon, mainly Christians and also Sunnis, says that this is a golden opportunity to get rid from Hezbollah domination and to get rid from Iranian influence and to build a new Lebanon that will be focused on the Lebanese nationalism instead of following after the Iranian plans to become an hegemonic power in the region. So if you look what happens now in Lebanon, many Lebanese feel euphoria. What they think that this is a very good opportunity to change the reality in Lebanon by, for example, by giving more mandate to the Lebanese army that it will be in the south of Lebanon, and by calling for the resolution of 1701 that Hezbollah will withdraw to the behind the river of Litani, and they call also many Lebanese call to dismantle all the militias in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other forces, Muslim Brotherhood, that they also establish an armed faction in Lebanon. So the Lebanese are trying to promote this vision. Actually, they'll only speak, but it's very important, like this discourse. Even I can mention that even inside Hezbollah, there is also an outcome. There is also implication on Hezbollah. We can see that from September, there is a growing trend of Hezbollah members that think and feel that Iran abandoned them because Iran was not ready to help to Hezbollah even when Nasrallah was targeted by Israel. So also Hezbollah members speak about the treason that Iran did to them, and also the Christians say the Christians are trying to speak with the Shia community, and they say to them in social media networks also, and also television programs. For example, Mariam Majdouline is one of the Christian Lebanese journalists who is very hostile to Hezbollah. And Mariam Majdouline and other Christians in Lebanon say to the Shia community in Lebanon, please wake up. You see that you trusted on a wrong actor. You, for 40 years, you washed the brains of the brains of your kids with the Islamic revolution ideology. And when Iran needs you, when Hezbollah needs Iran to be helped by Iran decided to abandon Hezbollah. So actually, there is, I think that the campaign against Hezbollah can bring also to internal division inside the Shia community in Lebanon, because they they see that Iran actually abandoned them in the net, because Iran is interested to secure and defend on its nuclear facilities. Iran is ready to sacrifice Hezbollah in order to defend the national security of Iran. Also the Christians say that, and also the Sunnis, and also the Shia community who support Hezbollah and is not supporting Hezbollah. Yeah, so this is very important. I forgot to mention that this operation of Israel in Lebanon can also accelerate the change of the region. It can strengthen the ties between the moderate actors, like between in the Middle East, between the UAE, Saudi Arabia. There is a chance that Israel will normalize ties with Saudi Arabia. There was a plan to do that before 7th of October. So if Hezbollah will be really will get a severe damage by Israel, and it will take him for a long time to rehabilitate its power, I think that there is a chance that the alliance between the moderate states in the Middle East will become stronger. Because the axis of resistance, as they call it, I call it the axis of chaos. The axis of chaos that Iran is building here is become weaker. The reputation of Iran has become damaged because of the targeting of Nasrallah, and Iran also, it is been described also by Hezbollah members as an actor, as a one that betrayed them and cannot be trustable. So I think that there is a good chance that the Middle East can be look others, that there will be more the ties between Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, Saudi Arabia will become stronger. Even the initiative to build a trade route from India to Saudi Arabia and from Saudi Arabia to Israel, this project can be achievable. I think there is also another aspect because I spoke about Israel and Lebanon and the region. We have to look at also in a large scale. The war between Israel to Hezbollah, it's not only of course it's a war against Islamic fundamentalism, but in the large scale, if we look, it's also a part of the big game, or let's say a large war between United States to Russia and also maybe China in the Middle East, because United States, of course, supporting Israel, because it's aware for the atrocities and that Hamas did, and also it's aware to the danger of Hezbollah to the region. But United States is also interested to cultivate its power in the Middle East, because otherwise, if it will not help to Israel, then Iran, of course, can be stronger. And we know about the ties between Iran to Russia, also China. So this front, Iran, Russia, China, they can accelerate, or they can cultivate their power in the Middle East and also in Africa, in the Red Sea. So the American support is very important, because it not only serves the interest of Israel, but also serves the interest of United States, and that's it. And what else I wanted to say also, that actually there are several scenarios what can happen now. If now we hear that Israel is about to penetrate inside Lebanon, Israel wants to already send military send soldiers inside Lebanon. Of course, the goal is to clean, to make sure that there is no any threat to the north cities of Israel. IDF is interested to clean the infrastructure and the rockets of Hezbollah from south of Lebanon, and to make sure that Hezbollah will withdraw to the north of Litani River, which means to implement the decision of 1701 in the UN. So, so the question is, if what will happen if Hezbollah now, because of this campaign, his reputation became damaged. You see, like in 2 weeks, he lost many of his powers. The question, if Hezbollah will accept the idea to withdraw to the north of the Litani, if it will decide to dismantle its weapon, I don't think he will do that. He will dismantle his weapon. And there is a question if we will be ready to be part, or to be ready to be only a political party in the parliament. I don't think this can happen, because I see many analysts say maybe Hezbollah will be ready to accept to become only a political actor. I don't think so, because Hezbollah for 40 years managed to penetrate to many institutions in Lebanon. I think also to the Lebanese army. And he thinks that is the spirit of the Iranian Islamic Revolution plan. So it's very sophisticated initiative to make Hezbollah to withdraw to the north. What can happen, I think, maybe a possible scenario is that the UN and other forces from the world, the Arab world, moderate actors. I'm not speaking about Turkey. Turkey is another story. But like the UAE, Bahrain, and also UN forces, will send the international force to the south of Lebanon, and also the army of Lebanon will help them to secure the border with Israel and to make sure that Hezbollah member will not get near to there. It's a very difficult task, but somebody has to do that, because Israel now is launched this military campaign to make sure that Hezbollah will not have a threat on the cities of Israel and will have another 7th of October. So this is a question. What will happen to Hezbollah? If Hezbollah will decide to withdraw to north of Lebanon, if there will be a rift inside the ranks of Hezbollah, because we saw that some members of Hezbollah are criticizing the Iranian regime, because accusing the Iranian regime for not helping them. So this is a question. I think it's this rift inside Hezbollah will increase. I think so. Let's see what time will tell. And another question is, what if Iran will decide to involve? Until now, Iran is avoiding from a response. Iran promised to have a revenge against Israel after the targeting of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And of course, Iran also said that it will not keep quiet after targeting Said Nasrallah. So the question, if Iran is really is not interested to involve, right now it doesn't seem like that. But if Iran will involve, and there are two camps in Iran. One camp, which is a moderate one, says it's not good to have a revenge action against Israel. We have to keep to follow on a quiet strategy. Like, we have to wait and see what time we'll have. Like, in other words, Iran is afraid. This camp in Iran that is led by the Iranian president is afraid that if it will respond and will have a revenge against Israel, then Israel will have an excuse to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran, and then NATO and United States will join to this campaign. The other camp in Iran, and I leave it also to my colleague Burzine, maybe we'll develop this issue. Another camp, of course, wants to respond now. If he will respond, so I think that the region, of course, will become deteriorated. All those talks about the 3 world war, it can happen, but right now, and then Israel will have to face more severely with those multi-front arenas. So, but right now it doesn't seem like that. Iran is afraid. You saw it that after the beeper attacks, the communication devices that Hezbollah members held, and then it exploded. You heard about it, right? About 3,000 Hezbollah members were injured, and also some of them were dead because of maybe, I don't know who did it, but they say that maybe the Israeli Mossad did it. So these had an influence on the cognitive climate in Iran. The Iranian regime also is afraid that maybe the Mossad, Israel, managed to penetrate inside the Iranian regime, and they prepared several surprises. So Iran is very afraid. We see that after the targeting of Nasrallah, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, they took him to a safe room. He was afraid that he was the next target. So we see that Israel actually managed, maybe it's only the beginning, but Israel managed to restore its deterrence power, because everybody said that Israel is weak as a spider web. But now, after, let's say, especially after September this year, I think that Israel restored its power of deterrence, and the enemies of Israel think twice. But still, the axis of evil, the axis of chaos, it doesn't mean now that he is not have the ability to attack Israel or to have a threat on the region. They have the abilities. I think that now, after Nasrallah was targeting, the next, let's say, highest leader in the axis of evil is Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, the leader of the Houthis in Yemen. Now he is the new face, not new face, he is the replacing the face of the axis of resistance. I think we should not underestimate the power of the Yemeni Houthis, because they can, again, Iran is continuing to arm them with many technological and developed technology that can threaten the region of the Red Sea. Okay, I think that this is maybe I spoke more than 10 minutes, but this is like the main thing. I think that if I sum up, Israel has to make sure that Hezbollah will not have a threat on the region of Israel, and to strengthen the ties with its allies, with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and India is also a very important actor in the region, extremely important, and because it's not a war only on Israel, it's a war against civilization, it's a war on hegemony in the region, and we don't want to see that now there is a lunatic Islamic fundamentalist, lunatic Iranian regime that has an influence here in the region, because otherwise, because the strategy of Iran is to build the strongholds in different parts of the world, and from there to send their arms and to increase the influence of Iran. Okay, that's it. I think. If I will be ready for the questions later on.
I was just thanking you for your very insightful comments and opening remarks. You raised very sensitive, critical, and volatile possibilities, which are definitely, revolving, definitely, storming our minds regarding the future of this conflict here. But before we get into the discussion, I would like to invite Burzine, our next speaker. So Burzine, before you start, definitely, you have a lot of bandwidth to speak about various aspects of this conflict. But what puzzles me is that we heard all those big fancy stories about Iran's legendary intelligence and nuclear capabilities and its strength and its this whole octopus and its ring stories of its proxies and all. So what's happening? Like, Iran is losing credibility. They are not retaliating. They are not doing anything, and it's a big joke now in the strategic community across the globe. So that's what puzzles me. Maybe you can just throw some more light on this question.
Good evening, everyone. I do hope I'm audible now. Thank you to both of you, Dr. Pandya and Barak, the latter for affording us the latest picture coming in from Tel Aviv. That provides an adequate scene of what has happened since the Israeli cabinet late last evening okayed a limited, very thoroughly planned ground invasion of southern Lebanon, which is underway as we speak. And to Dr. Barak's comments, I must mention the uprooting of 60,000 Israeli residents in the period following the 7th October massacre that has taken place over the months. That has happened in northern Israel, thanks to Hezbollah attacks, which started 24 hours after the Hamas attack. Hezbollah lost no time to swing into action on 8th October itself, and it has been relentless since then. But that is so much for the Israeli side of things. I come to it as an Iranist, And my initial remarks will be as follows, that 45 years on, the Islamic Republic must be left in no doubt that it cannot get away exporting terror with near impunity as it has been doing so to date. Its capabilities have been deteriorating, and of course, Israel is methodically, very thoroughly taking out Iran's hydra-headed network of terrorist proxies. And Iran would do well to consider that, and they already are, because the survival instinct in the regime is obviously very strong. By that, I mean that it can drop its proxies like hot potatoes. And we know certain Lebanese clerics who've been mocking in the wake of Nasrallah's death that where is your benefactor now? Because there were also Shia clerics who were not exactly in Iran's pocket. They were anti-Iranian. But of course, Nasrallah over the years had managed to ease all of them out. And with Tehran's backing and Khamenei's backing, became head of Hezbollah in 1992, as we know. And he had reigned ever since then of a state within a state, with everything from 60,000 troops to soldiers to rockets to armaments, a smuggling network consisting of diamonds across Africa, not to mention arms which are being smuggled across. And of course, as a self-styled imam, which he wasn't, but receiving what is called in Arabic among Shias and in Islamic theology, the Saham al-Imam. That is a fifth of the tithe, which Shia expatriates, Lebanese Shia expatriates, mostly in West Africa, but elsewhere across the diaspora, would pay to him. And that used to underwent and subvent Hezbollah as we speak. So much for that. But let me again come back to Iran, because that's where I'm more confident in affording some suggestions of what could possibly take place next. I'm a historian and Orientalist, so I can tell you what has happened, not always what would happen, but nevertheless, I would hazard some postulates here. Iran could undertake the following options, what it has on its table, beleaguered as it is: missile and drone attacks, turn to its remaining proxies and allies in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, terrorist operations abroad, target shipping in the Persian Gulf waters, and of course, cyber attacks. But from these that I've just pointed out, I wish to now dilate for the remaining time in my opening remarks to the terrorist and criminal operations abroad for the benefit of your audience. Saif al-Adil, Al-Qaeda's head, who incidentally is based in Iran, gave a call out to all Ummah brothers worldwide to travel to Afghanistan to receive training in order to liberate Palestine and avenge Hamas's deterioration and its being taken out in Gaza. And of course, we know that Iran is not going to sit back, given the very fact that Mr. Adil and Al-Qaeda is now Iran-based as such, and has been long so as an asset maintained by the Tehran regime. A curious aspect this February past, and these are incidents, ladies and gentlemen, which have taken place between 7th October to date. I'm going to cull certain salient instances for your understanding. This February past, Dr. Pandya, Dr. Barak, the Japanese Yakuza mob was approached by Tehran because they wanted to, the Japanese were going to supply weapons-grade plutonium to Iran in return for machine guns and other arsenal. And of course, that is a network of international crime, which is Dr. Pandya's forte, who would be interested to know. The Japs in question were going to pass it on to Burmese insurgents, the Tehrani weapons. This was discovered through an investigation in Phuket in Thailand in February 2022, with 3 Burmese rebels who had brought with them samples of uranium, thorium, and plutonium. Then let's come to the fact that, as reported in May 2024, Iran is hiring criminals across Europe, criminal gangs, particularly in Sweden and Belgium, to target Israeli missions, diplomatic missions. And indeed, there were 2 hand grenades thrown at the Israeli embassy in Brussels in recent times, and other hand grenade attacks were planned. The attacks in question I refer to are given the fact that Sweden's immigrant criminal gangs constitute the per capita in Europe the highest number of deadly lead to highest number of deadly shootings. Sweden tops all charts in terms of immigrant criminal gangs, and Tehran lost no time in eyeing them, particularly the Foxtrot Kurdish gang in Stockholm and its rivals too, but paying off both of them off in order to target Israel. And not just Israeli officialdom by the embassies, which I mean, but let's be quite upfront about it, targeting Jews, period, bottom line. That is what Iran is obsessed with, and it undertook that. Then there is the question, as reported again in March 2024, of Iranian weapons being transported, ostensibly on Iranian shipping vessels from Bandar Abbas to Valencia, Antwerp, or Ravenna in Europe, but not without a convenient detour to the Syrian port of Latakia for depositing arms, which are then sent overland to Hezbollah as they were being done. And again, we do know that from intelligence, namely the fact that the said weapons were being coordinated by Iran's Quds Force Unit 190 and transported to Hezbollah's Unit 4400. And of course, the interesting thing is that the vessels in question would continue to Europe with their so-called consignment after cleaning out the containers and pallets and, of course, doctoring the documents. And when you come into Europe, as large ports like Antwerp or Valencia, you can imagine they are not small ports where greater scrutiny can be afforded to vessels because there's not time since there is a turnaround for vessels to berth and all. So obviously, Iran could take advantage of this to, do it. And it had been doing this all along, so to speak. Then there is the question of the Kinahan cartel, which is the world's most wanted drug gang. And according to the US Treasury and Drug Enforcement Agency, which the Kinahan cartel has also been approached and has been in contact with both the Iranian regime and with Hezbollah. And they have had activity going on hitherto for weapons smuggling and the like. Now, the question is, what next then, as the title of our webinar says? Iran could threaten the West by it accelerating its nuclear program, but it should be left in no doubt that there would be a reprisal from the West on that count. That could be put out by them in the first instance. But at the same time, it will also use its these proxies that I've mentioned, particularly the lumpen criminal elements and terrorists. And here that brings me to a point again of also these assorted units, assorted gangs and lumpen elements universally, hit squads that Tehran is willing to pay any price to take Jews out, no questions asked. So Iran's behavior remains audacious. And it is a risk-averse regime. It has always been so. It will continue so it's down, but by no means out. And then this brings me also to the final point here, and I will conclude before we open up for the seminar. During this spring and summer 2024, ladies and gentlemen, we had heard that El Al, the Israeli national carrier, would be resuming its network across the world, including Bombay, and of course, resuming operations to Delhi after a decade plus, as well as Dubai and elsewhere. I think, given the current situation, El Al would do well, Michael, to defer resumption of operations because, given these recent developments after the Hania assassination and, of course, the pagers and Nasrallah being obliterated, because Jews, I fear, will be targets any and everywhere, including Dubai, which will be very, very vulnerable because of the Iranian presence in Dubai, which is massive, to say the least. An Iranian merchant community, which has historically been there, and which is but 35 minutes across the Persian Gulf on a speedboat or a dhow, which comes into Dubai's creek to take out Jews if they can find them. And their families, no questions asked. Then there is also the question of India, whose security network, quite frankly, is not up to task. And there is an history of this, given that Israeli diplomats were targeted in 2012 and also in December 2023, when a bomb explosion went off in Delhi in the environs of the Israeli embassy, and Indian police subsequently confirmed that it was an IRGC blast. So that tells you that the Indians are not exactly pretty much up to the task in protecting Israeli diplomats, and Israel will have to do it on its own stump. So that is to be taken into question, given the fact that after the Damascus consulate bombing also, which took place this April past, on 5th April, the Israeli consulate in Bombay, as well as the embassy in Delhi, was suddenly closed down. So there must have been a very high credible threat of an attack against both missions on this very 5th April 2024, a few months ago, and that which led to that particular abrupt action, which cannot be ruled out again in the future, given how things in India are, and that the security network isn't quite cracked up to be as such. I'll stop here, and I will open up for question and answers to one and all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Burzine. So we have a lot of questions for you. Definitely, we have questions. The Q&A session is open to all our audience. I'll begin with a few questions from my side. But I would like to inform that Michael had to leave because there was an emergency security situation. I think, in Israel, we know that sometimes you have these rocket shelling and everything, so you have to get into the bunkers. So I'm really sorry for that, but maybe he can join in sometime. But yes, we'll begin with the questions now. So Burzine, my first question. With the current situation, it seems that Israel's edge in terms of military capabilities, in terms of even strategic capabilities, intelligence capabilities, is already proven. They have almost neutralized Hamas, and with this way situation is unfolding in the Middle East, it seems that they are very soon going to completely obliterate Hezbollah also. But if the trajectory of the events is just seen in the context of the events that are unfolding now, it looks very simple. But sometimes things which look too simple, they are not that too simple. You have all these international actors like China, which is like watching the situation. They recently hosted Hamas leaders. Russia also watching the situation out there, and recently Mr. Dugin made some statement, who is kind of an advisor to Putin regarding the situation in Lebanon. So these rivalries were mostly, when it involves China, Russia, and US, they are basically about the geopolitical issues between them, about the geopolitical rivalries between them. So do you think that all these big powers will simply let Iran, and its, I would say, set up just to go down like this, or are they going to intervene? And if they intervene, then the situation seems to be moving into an entirely different direction. What's your take on
that? They could assist Iran as its temporal allies. They're not exactly natural partners for life. Take Russia in the first instance. Of course, the Russians are rabid anti-Semites. We have a history of that. But even putting that aspect aside, and Russia's actions, even during the Cold War era against Israel, it was the USSR, mind you, that along with the Soviet bloc, which engineered the Zionist racism motion at the UN, which was only repealed later. But in 1975, it was the communist bloc that passed it by exhorting the Arabs to do that. China, as usual, as was typical with the Chinese transactional attitude, they will wait and watch on to see their own self-interest. And if Iran is on the losing side, they're not going to be particularly put out to assist it. I can answer it in this way. As a Chinese general once, back in 2016, said, Pakistan is Israel, just as the US perceives Israel as a natural ally in the Middle East. China would be moved to do something for Pakistan, but not particularly so much for Iran by craning its neck out. It has a very transactional relationship with Iran only for supply hydrocarbon supplies, nothing more than that. And of course, the Iranian regime has benefited from Chinese deep packet information technology to curb its dissidents and slow down the internet and other surveillance measures. So that could, if it were to come by later, I see the gist of your question as there are those who wouldn't want to see the Iranian regime unravel after 45 years. That is the gist, Dr. Pandey, of what you put to me. But the question is, yes, okay, but who is it? Well, within Iran, it is a thoroughly discredited regime. But for the Bazari merchant Shia class And those who have benefited from the regime, the elite, the IRGC and others, more than most Iranians within Iran, but definitely outside in the diaspora, would be happy to see the regime crumble. It's just that outside in the diaspora, the opposition is so pathetic that they can't bring themselves to organize something effectively against it. Iran's near abroad, all the GCC states would be more than happy to see this menace put aside, given that Khomeini had been since 1979 egging and instigating insurrections, including attempted coups in Bahrain in December 81, as I've mentioned on Usanas Foundation webinars before, Hajj riots in Saudi Arabia in 1987, then coming to Lebanon and the US and French Marines who were murdered, 250 plus in 1983. To mention about Western diplomats who were kidnapped, including the Archbishop of Canterbury's representative for the peace mission, Terry Waite, years ago. All this was engineered by Nasrallah, and he couldn't have done any of this but for blessings from Tehran. So most of the Sunni Arab regimes would be happy to see the regime in Tehran crumble, because it is given to fomenting instability and sponsoring Islamist oppositions within their own regimes, which are precarious to say the least. Iran does have its eyes in Jordan. In terms of Saudi Arabia, well, just a few years ago, Houthi drones were targeting Riyadh International Airport, the actual international airport terminal, but the drone was intercepted and blew up, or it would have gone right through the roof of the terminal. So you can, and again, that gives an example of what I said, that Iran's behavior is very risk averse. It doesn't think twice about its actions as such, or the repercussions or consequences of it, so to speak. So all this must be taken into consideration with the fact that what I've mentioned in my opening remarks, that Iran will leave no stone unturned now to hunt and take out Jews wherever it can. Not Israelis per se, but Jews globally, universally speaking, as a soft target, because it is a regime that is enraged, it is beleaguered, and it will lash out in that sense, because that's all pretty much that has in the cards that it holds, apart from the nuclear threat as such, of escalating, upgrading to and going fully nuke. Though of course they are a signatory to the NPT, so that needs to be put into context too. Yes.
Thank you very much, Burzine. I'll come back to this point once again after my next question. But before that, to the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box and I can read them out, or if you want to ask them yourself, please raise your hands. So Burzine, my next question is that what's exactly happening in Iran? Are they not retaliating because of their preoccupation with the Southern Caucasus, or something is really messed up inside Iran? Like I've heard lots of stories that after the recent hijab protest, the situation internally is very precarious and there's a huge dissent among the people. In fact, I've even been told that one more spark and the regime is under severe threat. The election of Mr. Pezeshkian also shows entirely different signals. So what's exactly the situation inside? Is it something really bad that we are just simply not understanding?
Let's come to the women factor issue. You will find at certain points in time, Dr. Pandya, women on the streets of Tehran and elsewhere, particularly metropolitan Tehran, who are brave enough to go unveiled about. And thanks to Iranian surveillance, which is very strongly implanted across the country, such women who attend to cafeterias in the fashionable districts of Tehran, for instance, for coffee and that sort of thing, those establishments are being targeted by the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, MOIS, to identify these women and to target them as such. So that is ongoing as I speak on a daily basis in Tehran. These establishments, because they allow such women to come and sit down and have a cup of coffee, that sort of thing, like how did you permit them, sort of thing. So these establishments are being targeted, number one. Number two, yes, there is a groundswell of disgust and opinion, all the more so because Dr. Pezeshkian was put out as a SOP candidate. And of course, I never bought into it with the election that this was yet another Khatami on the scene to reform the place, because he couldn't. He is a rubber stamp president, as all are. And Khamenei, as supreme leader, you must remember, ladies and gentlemen, has a history since coming into office in June 89 of humiliating every and any president down the line and neutralizing them when it suited him so as to maintain his position. He had, except Rouhani, who was his, shall we say, his most faithful poodle, Khamenei had stand-up ding-dong issues privately, behind scenes also, but and sometimes publicly, with Khatami, with Ahmadinejad, who was also a hardliner, but Khamenei didn't get on with him in the second term after the forged elections and the Green Movement, with and the others in the Rafsanjani, who actually eased Khamenei into office back after Khomeini's death in June 89. So Khamenei has a habit of doing that and sidelining presidents who, even at the best of times, are just titular heads of the government, because he is the head of state and he calls the shots in the Fanon analysis as a hardliner who is wedded to the revolution's ideals of 1979 of no compromise with the West. So that is the second bit to point out. And the third bit, well, the Caucasus partly occupies the minds of Tehran's planners and intelligence deep state. The current issue, particularly after Ismail Haniya's assassination, is this, Dr. Pandya: intelligence failures on their part, that is, and the stunning intelligence success on the part of the Israelis. Hours after Ismail Haniya's assassination and before the body was even flown out to Doha for funeral, the family members and individuals responsible for the building where he was domiciled overnight were promptly arrested and grilled, and I dare say even tortured, because Iran has worked out that there was a mole from within who could have let on this. And there is every good reason to believe that it was an Iranian intercept which led finally to discovering Hassan Nasrallah in that bunker deep below a Beirut apartment when he was taken out on Friday evening. There is every reason to believe, as Ahmadinejad put out in an interview to CNN Turk, that the head of the anti-Mossad faction that was set up by MOIS, the Iranian intelligence services, was actually in the pay of Mossad itself. A particular unit had been set up to track for Israel. And of course, you can imagine how humiliating it was, because a former president, and this interview went out just, I believe, yesterday or day before yesterday, Dr. Pandya, which is doing the rounds on social media. It's in Turkish, and where Ahmadinejad said that the MOIS, the ministry, the Vezarat, Vezarat-e Amniyat va Ittilaat-e Kishvar, it's called VEVAK, the acronym of Iran intelligence, had set up this particular unit for targeting Israel and Mossad activities. And it turned out that the very head who had been appointed was actually in the pay of Mossad. So you can imagine the stunning humiliation upon humiliation that has been visited upon Iran. And they are, in a manner of speaking, petrified, because these successes of Israel are in large measure due to intelligence successes that it has been enjoying. And I pointed this out in an interview on CNBC News in the wake of the Damascus consulate being bombed, the target bomb and taking out of the IRGC commanders. I stated then, this was on 3rd April when the incident occurred this year, that Israel is finally back in the game and upping its deterrence. And with that Damascus attack, Jerusalem was telling the world, but also Iran and others, that it will call the time and place for defending itself and for taking out its enemies. It is not on the back foot anymore, and that it is back in the game. So it's not just Haniya and Nasrallah's decimation which are successes, and rightly so. I would attribute it going back even to that 3rd April Damascus consulate premises being razed to the ground, and the taking out of those 2 important IRGC commanders who had been very deadly players in the region, and particularly in Syria.
Thank you, Burzine. So you just mentioned about Iran, planning to target Jews across the world through by operationalizing its terror proxies and its criminal gangs network and all. Now, given that situation, do you think it's advisable or like it's rational for the Israelis to go for, to think about the regime change in Iran, or is it even advisable, feasible? Adding more to this question or this, argument, I believe that the elections in the US are going to have major repercussions on the situations in West Asia. In case if Kamala Harris comes, then definitely, we can expect a different US stand, or not entirely different, but definitely some kind of moderation in the US stance. So, given these different factors, do you think that as of now, is it a rational idea for Jerusalem to think about the regime change in Iran, or is it even possible?
I wouldn't know exactly on that, but what I can answer, and I hope I'm answering to the best of my abilities, like this. Prior to Nasrallah's taking out, there would have been some red lines for Mr. Netanyahu in terms of preemptive strike on the Iranian mainland. But in wake of what occurred this Friday, it's no holds barred now, as I see it, between now and the election in November. In principle, there is nothing to stop, given that Israel's F-35 stealth fighters can very effectively penetrate Iran defenses. And Iran's options for conventional retaliation are extremely limited because it is technologically inferior to that which Israel possesses. A mass Iranian missile launch, as we saw, as a spectacular fireworks show, literally, in the wake of the Damascus consulate incident, as I mentioned, was intercepted very effectively by Israel's stealth dome and also by Jordan and Saudi Arabia, as you know. So there is comfort in that thought, which vindicates what I've been saying, that there is no sense of Islamic unity in the Ummah, that these regimes in the Middle East would naturally come to a so-called Muslim republic's assistance. It did not. Jordan intercepted those missiles from landing on Israeli homes. Ditto, Saudi Arabia did so too, which were fired from Iran, the Iranian mainland as such. So that has to be kept in mind. But of course, then there's the question of slightly coming home with the ballistic missiles and that can reach Israel in minutes from the Hezbollah arsenal. That is very much on Israel's doorstep. That could continue for a while because the entire arsenal has not been decimated. And it remains to be seen with the ground operation, which has just started, as I mentioned in the early hours this morning, as to what it would pan out. But the question is, the Hezbollah top brass has been taken out, to be sure. But the question then must be seen in the light of the Shia sense of martyrdom and the obsession with bloodletting that is so very particular to Shia doctrinal thinking, not so much with Sunnis, that Hezbollah may not be entirely decimated. It would still be something of a force, but a very, very deteriorated force. The question is, one would ideally like to see it be vanquished, because then Lebanon can have a new start which it has not seen since independence from the French in 1943, or since the end of the civil war in 1993 brokered by Saudi Arabia. And of course, then when things were just picking up, and the Israeli attack which took place in 2006, July 2006, thanks to Nasrallah starting again a war out of the blue with Israel and attacking and kidnapping Israeli soldiers, as we know, the so-called 34 day war which took place in 2006. And Dr. Pandya, Nasrallah, at the end of that bruising in 2006, apologized publicly in a rhetorical flourish to the Lebanese people that had I known what Israel's response would be, I would have never undertaken it. But evidently, he had not learned his lesson, nor had he had that in mind, because, as I said, Hezbollah commenced attacking Israel 24 hours into the 7th October massacre of Israeli civilians at the music concert. On 8th October, it started. So obviously, he was, unrepentant and wanted to take Lebanon down a hell path. which he did in many ways, is than one, including that August 2020 bombing of the blowing up of that Beirut port of ammonium nitrate, which was stored. That bit, that consignment in question, which was sitting for months, if not years, was in a part of the harbor which was run by the Shia Hezbollah faction. And 300,000 Lebanese were uprooted and made homeless due to that bombing, massive bombing that took place across metropolitan Beirut. And Nasrallah came in for a lot of flack for that too. Most recently, just prior to his death, due to the corruption and inefficiency scandals which were leveled against him. But the point is, it was so very difficult to take out the Shia factor, which was a menace in Lebanese politics, which Dr. Barak spoke about earlier.
Yeah, thank you very much, Putin. So just we have two final questions, and I'll request a quick answer for them from you, because we are already running, quite like ahead of our time, our schedule. So just what can be the likely reactions of the other Arab states? I mean, do you think that the Arab Street can compel the other Arab states to join the fray? First question. And secondly, if the situation in the Europe worsens, let's say, I mean, the situation on the Ukraine front really gets more disturbing, and the Ukrainians are firing, like, let's say, long-range weapons into the mainland territory, and Russians retaliate very firmly. They, ramp up things on that border, and the Americans are more involved in the European situation, and they are not in the position to be as active as they could have been, I mean, earlier on the West Asian front. So in that case, do you think that Israel would be left on its own to fend for itself, or, I mean, would that be successful, or what's your take on that?
Israel has always been on its own. It has realized that only too bitterly since 1948, it has to carry the show on its own, and it can't depend on anyone, and it has to depend on its own resources and its tact to do so. Whether Ukraine continues or not, or festers, which it will, for example, there is the US fleet in the Mediterranean, which was something of a cover of confidence for Israel to undertake what it did in Lebanon recently with the Nasrallah factor. But Iran could start targeting global shipping in Persian Gulf waters, and the US is obliged then to come in to assist its allies from the Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain to assist UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the rest. That would occur, and the US fleet, the Fifth Fleet is already based in Bahrain at Mina Salman, so that is there in place. And also in the European context, there is the factor, particularly among a warped, progressive population that has started calling for eliminationist anti-Semitism, masked as progressive leftist politics. That will continue for a while, and Israel may have lost something in the court of opinion, but the opinions of these individuals who glorify terrorism on campuses doesn't really matter. And I mean, you don't need to go to a Hezbollah meeting to glorify terrorism. Just visit Columbia University's campus to hear what is being spoken in uptown Manhattan to realize the mindset of such individuals. So Israel will ride it out alone, come what may. It is a seasoned player, and it is making very clear to the world that if you shed Jewish blood, there are consequences.
Thank you. And just one final question. Sorry, I can't just resist myself from getting more and more involved in this very interesting subject. What do you think will be India's, role in this entire region and the escalating conflict dynamics in the next
nothing as
4 or 5 years? Okay.
Nothing as usual.
Except for its big ticket IR conferences loaded with exotic dances and.
But as usual, the Indian mentality, the default position, the knee-jerk reaction is, it's not our problem, it's not our issue. So why be involved in the fray as such? Okay. In the Ukrainian context, you've seen that. In the West Asian context, as the Indians like to call it, you can see that too. There'll be just platitudes will be made about Palestinian self-determination and two-nation solution and this, that, and the other. And Israel and India will just not do anything much. But India is privately appreciative of how Israel can defend its own citizens from terrorist networks that target and spill Israeli blood. Maybe the Indians could take a cue from that and realize that Indians who have also suffered in more ways than one cannot be just left to die as it happens. And as you mentioned about the Kashmir factor, one last point, and I really must be permitted this. Thanks to the $3.2 billion Indo-Iranian rupee real scam, which is about 20,000 crore rupees, thanks to UCO Bank Calcutta, after the sanctions and the barter trade and rupee trade of Indian oil importers paying off in rupees, the rupee mechanism that was set up in place with these Vostro accounts, which you see now even with Russia occurring. This scandal has led, and it's now the UCO Bank has suspended officials in Calcutta, and the Enforcement Directorate in New Delhi has stepped in. This has been ongoing since 2016, and Indians seem to be blissfully ignorant about it. My point is that Iran has access to a slush of rupee funds through this. Do you realize what these rupee funds could be harnessed against? You brought in the question of destabilization in the valley, the Kashmir Valley, and I think you would do well to realize, and Indians in New Delhi would realize as to what India, because Iran is a regional instability factor and fomenting trouble. Who's to say it would not do anything against India in the near future, given Khamenei's recent remarks about the so-called plight of Indian Muslims as such too? They have a ready access to rupees. So there's no question of tracing foreign exchange, murky networks of wire transfers or this, that, and the other. They are sitting on a pile of rupees since 2016. And this scandal is of 20,000 crore rupees, which occurred because of the barter agreement of oil purchases that took place during the period of sanctions, and after the 2015 JCPOA agreement had come into effect, which of course Mr. Trump was quite rightly to rescind.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Burzine. I think this is a very, very critical issue for India. Recently, yes, Mr. Khomeini did make a statement which was very derogatory and very offensive to the Indian sensibilities. In India, the situation pertaining to radicalization and extremism is getting worse with every passing day, and things are like in a very bad shape. But yes, I guess the last point which you mentioned, we need to have a little 15 to 20 minute session on that separately, because it's a very technical issue and most of the people don't understand that. So in the next
Dr.
session,
Pandya, UCO Bank Calcutta and IDBI, Industrial Development Bank of India, have been authorized by the RBI for these rupee real transfers. So very briefly, Indian oil importers, it could be Mangalore Petroleum or other companies, they pay the Iranians, or the Iranians rather pay in rupees. So you see, so of course it's a win-win situation for India because it doesn't have a forex drain. But the question is that Iran is happy to receive rupees, but what's it going to do with that is something which geostrategists, analysts of Kashmir studies and others, and terrorism studies like you must ponder very hard and deep in times to come.
thank you. Thank you very much, Burzine. So with that, we've come to the end of our today's discussion. I would like to thank both our experts, Burzine and Dr. Barak. Dr. Barak had to leave because of an emergent security situation. We can understand how serious the situation is in West Asia. So we look forward to having more of such discussions in the future and analyze the upcoming trends. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for joining. I would like to thank Usanas team, Dr. Jain, Preeti Khenta, Nikita, and all our smart and intelligent interns who are taking notes of the conference, of the session. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.